Hello, this is Bill Reck. I'm the National Environmental Engineer, and today we're going to talk about some beginning principles of how to get started with a new revision of a conservation practice standard in the CPD DMS system. I'm going to start from logging into the system. I'm going to show you a few basics of the Quark layout. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some things called collections and how we store our standards in the system. And I'm going to walk you through how to take an existing National Conservation Practice Standard and start a revision on it so you can either revise it yourself or hand it off to a national team lead. And so the person that can start a revision is a national discipline lead for a practice. So we'll get started, and for the purposes, I'm going to assume everybody's got a link into the CPD DMS system. It's also Quark for us, and this is what it looks like. For those of you who are wondering about where you get a link, if you're in the system already, you've probably been getting some emails like this that come from noreply@ecm.usda.gov, and there'll be a title line in here, and it'll tell you something. And this particular one is saying a new document's been created and assigned to you, and down here to see the national standard, click here, and there's a link. That's another way to get into the system, is when it sends you an email, and basically it's sending you an email saying you have something, a work item that's been assigned to you. So when you come into Quark, this is what it looks like. You've basically got three different areas of the system. On the left, you've kind of got a menuing system that's there. In the center, when you click on one of these menu items, this is what's in that item. And in the right side is a preview area where you can, if you click on a standard or a statement of work or another document, you can preview the document in that window. So this first, let's talk a little bit about some of these items in our list. At the top, we have My Searches, and there's a couple that are here. One of them is called Assignments. And assignments is any time that an item has been routed to you, it will show up in this assignments group. And the way that conservation practice documents works, and something that it's very good at, is routing a document through a process. And so at certain points in the process, it goes to certain people. So you may, as a national discipline lead, may take it, and then they may forward it to a team leader to work on editing a standard. And then at some point, that team leader may either route it back to the discipline lead or send it out for a quality assurance review, and then it'll go to another group of people who will have a chance to review it, and then send it back, and then it can be sent out to all the state folks for a national review process. So there's a definite process and a number of steps, and each step along the way, the document gets routed to different people. It gets assigned to them. And so when items get assigned to you, they'll show up in this assignments category. The other category right below that is checked out, and these are documents that you have that are you've already checked out of the system. This checkout is very similar to a SharePoint check-in, check-out system. So if you use that, you'll understand what that means. Below that are a couple standard searches that have been set up for us by our vendor. one here is in progress interims. That's a really good one. Although for my view, it's pretty empty right now because we haven't put all the interims into the system yet. But when you click on this search, it'll show you all the interims that are out there. There's another one here for standard status that will show you where all the standards that are currently being reviewed, where they are in the process, whether they're whether they're pre-quality assurance review, whether they're quality assurance review complete or ready for the Federal Register, ready for national release, etc. So that's a good one to tell us where our standards are at in the process. And this bottom section is where our actual documents are. And these are called collections. If you look at them, they look like little file folders, and I kind of think of them as file folders. They are where we store our files. And you'll notice that there's a national, a state list. These are where our national standards are. And, obviously the state standards would be very similar to state standards down there. When you open it up, you'll notice that you have a list of different discipline lead groups. And each one of these is set up, if you look into the NHCP index, every standard is assigned to a discipline lead or to a group of discipline leads. And so these follow that same setup. We do that so that we control who has access or who has the ultimate authority over these standards. And if it's a multiple one, you'll have a primary discipline lead and a secondary discipline lead. So they both have access. Once you go into one of these groups, you'll then see the listing of the different standards that are under that group. And if you go into one of those groups, and here's mine, environmental engineering, you can go into one of those groups. Here's 359, and these are different collections for different years. We have a 2003, that's the current standard, and we have a 2017 one that's ready for the next NHCP release. You can go into each one of those, and what you'll see is the standard. And I could click on the standard, and it'll show me a preview in our right window here. So that's a little bit about how the Quark system, the hierarchy is set up, and how we store our standards and our other documents. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you, let's show you some state collections first. If I click on state, you'll then see that we have all the states in here, and you can click on a particular state and go in, and you'll be able to see their standards underneath there. This is something that we recently added, so there's not much in there right now, but just to give you an idea of where we're headed. And I might as well show you this one too, the CPS test Quark. We have a folder set up for testing. There's a test IR in here. So, and this is just an area that we can go in and look at some things in here and not hurt anything in other places. These in here are live, so they are our versions that at some point in time, we're going to have these linked in to the Field Office Tech Guide and to the Conservation Practice Standard database. All right. So next thing that I want to show you is what we started out with, and that was how do you, as a national discipline lead, start the revision of one of your standards. And so we're going to look at one right now that needs to be updated, and it's a water management engineer standard, and it's mold drain, and that's one we're gonna look at updating. You'll look in here and you'll see that currently there's a folder in here for 2003. If I look in the 2003 folder, you'll see a bunch of files. One of them up here says 482 NHC CPS. That's the actual standard. These other documents are just sections of a standard. And the reason we have them broken out into sections is because at some point in time we'll want to reuse some of these sections in other documents, like the definition. We'll want to be able to pull that into other places. The same thing with purposes. Those two items we can pull into other documents like implementation requirements, and that's kind of where we're headed. So for now, I have a 2003 version of mold drain, and I want to update that particular standard. I want to create a revision. So there's a couple different ways that we can do it. I'm going to show you the easy way, because our last update, they created a really nice way for us to revise a standard. Down here at the bottom, there's a little arrow that you'll see, and if you click that arrow, there's two screens here. There's a workspace, and that's what we're seeing here. There's also a CPS management button, and when you do that, it pulls up this page and has a series of buttons that you can use. And the buttons that you see will be different than the buttons that I see or other people with different roles see. When you look at the left, it tells you what your different roles are. Like for me right now, it's telling me that I'm an administrator. I'm part of the All Conservation Practice Standard Users Group. That just means that I'm in the system. It's telling me that I'm a National Discipline Lead for EE, and it's also got me listed as a National Discipline Lead for the Water Management Engineers, and I had that added so that we could look at mold drain. And we chose mold drain because we didn't think that we could do much damage with mold drain, since that is a standard that's hardly ever used and needs to be updated, and so we just chose that one as our guinea pig for today's purposes. When you look at the buttons over here, one of the buttons is National CPS Revision. That's a button that all National Discipline Leads will have, and they'll be able to revise the standards that they have dominion over. You'll also see a new National Standard button. That's not going to show up on yours. That's only going to show up on the administrator's screen, and that's because for new standards, the chairman of the NHCP committee has to give it a number. And so in order for us to create a new standard, that has to be done by the administrator so he can give it a number in the system. All right, so National CPS Revision. Click the button. You'll notice a pop-up occurs. It says we need to enter a valid code. So I've as a discipline lead for mold drain, I've forgotten everything about it, right? So I've got my Word document here ready to go, and where'd it go? So I can see that mold drain is 482, and so I'll put 482 in here. Enter a valid year. Let's just be optimistic and say that we're going to get this done in 2017. Really, that number should be when you think you get it done. Right now, this is pretty late in the year, and you'd probably be better off putting in 2018, and maybe we'll go ahead and do that instead, 2018, because you really don't have time to get through the process in what's left of this calendar year. It'll probably be 2018 before you could release it. And then here there's one that says NTL. That stands for the National Team Lead for this particular standard. And for editing this standard, I'm going to send that one to Peter Robinson. He's our water management engineer out in the West NTSC. And Peter, if I can spell his name right, Peter is going to be our national team lead for 482 once we get done with it. So create a national revision, create the button, and it goes through a process, and it says national standard created. You'll also notice there's a little pop-up down here that tells me there was a new revision created. So I'll click OK, and now I'm going to go back to my workspace. And when I look at mold drain, it's not there. Well, the reason it's not there is because the software needs to refresh. And you look up here, you'll see a folder for it. And so it's there, you just don't see it because it hasn't refreshed yet. So I'm going to double click on the folder. There it is. And you'll notice that all the files that are here, they're basically all the same as in 2003. The 2003 version, this is our official ones. So now I've got a 2018. These are all set up to go through the process. So there's a couple things that we need to do to make sure that Peter has access to this. And one of them is you have to, and this is important, those of you who are barely paying attention, really pay attention to this next step, okay? So right-click on 2018, and you're going to go in here to Edit Collection. And what we're going to do is we're going to give Peter Robinson permissions to edit this standard. One of the things about this system is it's very tight on control. We don't want just anybody being able to edit our standards and be able to have final say. So you're given a lot of power to whoever is your team lead when you let them edit the collection. So that's one of the things that this system is good at, is it's controlling who has access. So edit the collection, and on the left here you see a list of several things. What we're wanting to do is user profiles, and we want to add Peter Robinson. And you'll notice Peter's already been added. I've been in this mold drain earlier, and I have already added Peter to the parent directory, so he's in there. But if I wanted to add somebody else, I could click on this Add Users and find the person that you want to add in the list, and then there's the little take away and add button. So we want to say we want to put Eric Fleming in. I could add him over and click OK, and then Eric's going to show up. If you click on this particular one, if you look at the role, it says he's the National Discipline Lead. Well, he's not the National Discipline Lead. He is actually the National Team Lead. So we could have two team leads in a standard. They both have the same capability to go in and edit the standard. So once you've got that done and you've added in who you want to add in, and I'm actually going to take Eric back out, you click Save, and that has saved that collection and saved that permission in there, so Peter Robinson now has the ability to edit the standard. I'm just going to do a couple more things, and then we'll be done with this segment. I'm going to open up the standard and just do a couple things and show you a couple things. So when you click on a standard, you want to check it out, and that's the same terminology that we use for SharePoint. A couple different ways you can do that. You can right-click and use this checkout button right here. Alternatively, over here on the upper right, there's a couple icons. This one is for checkout. This one that is grayed out is for check-in. so I could check it out here as well. Just click that. Excuse me. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring up this Quark editor for mold rain. This editor is fairly similar to what you saw a minute ago in the other screen. This is the analogous system to Word for editing our documents. You'll notice on the left you have a menuing system. On the right you have what's in the menu, and on the other side you have a preview. Again, I'm fixing to tell you something that's really important. So this is something you want to really pay attention to. These different sections are blued out. If you remember, I showed you a bunch of files earlier where it was, the purpose of the definition. In order to edit these different sections, if you edit it here in this document, it'll also be edited in that other file. They're linked. But you've got to turn it on so that the editing, you can actually edit it. So come over here to the left, the definition, right-click, and just click Edit. And you could go through and do that in every section since you're going to be in here editing it, just so you have access to them. But if they're blue, just know that you can't get in here and edit. In fact, if you go to that section and try to do something, it's not going to let you. So right now I'm going to send Peter some messages about the standard that he's about to get that I want him to consider when he's about to look at it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in a couple comments. So at the top, you'll notice we have home. This is, these are your title, your bold, italics controls, kind of like Word. There's an insert button, if you want to insert pictures or equations. A review button. This is where you can add comments and track changes. So I'm going to add a comment. And I'm going to say to Peter, let's do bullets. And basically, if you've seen the new layout, the new exhibit in the updated NHCP, if you haven't seen it, it's get it from the NHCP subcommittee. And basically, we're switching to how our purposes look to a more standardized, bulleted fashion. And we're doing that to make it easier to use these purposes in other places. But anyway, we're going to bullets. So all standards moving forward will have a new bulleted format. And then I'm also going to come down here to the references section, and I'm going to give him another comment that says, let's at least have the engineering field handbook as a reference. So, I've done a couple things. If I wanted to come in here and suggest some new words, track changes are currently on, so I could suggest new wording. And it's going to show up as, stuff that I've entered in for when that goes back to the team that's working on it. So at this point, I'm going to close it out because it's about to the point where I want to hand it off to Peter. So I'm going to click on Save and Close. All right, this is another time that you really need to pay attention to what needs to go in this section. Taking a couple seconds to load. Notice that the file name is already done for me. We don't change the file name because this format is how we want the format to be. You may end up changing a name if, say, you started in 2017 and later on we get to 2018 and that's when that actually gets released. You may need to come in here and change the date then, but that would be the time for that. There's metadata down here, and if your standard came from an existing standard, this will all be transferred over from the previous one. Notice that the team lead came in because I entered that earlier myself as National Discipline Lead because that's who started it. There's some sections down here. These don't have to be complete until you get to the point where the standard is ready for NHCP release. Some of these different fields are required for you to move on, and if they are, when you hit save and if they're not filled out, they'll turn red and it'll flash at you and say, hey, you need to give me a unit or you need to give me a whatever. So those are all filled out. I want to route it to Peter. So up here, this pre-QAT draft, this is the pre-internal reviews before it goes to quality assurance, before it goes out for internal review. So that's where we're at in our process. But I want to route it to Peter Robinson. So I can come down here. You'll notice Peter got added to my list of people that I can route it to directly. So I can click on Route It to Peter Robinson and click Save. So now that I've done that, you'll notice that the file is no longer checked out. The routed to has been changed to routed to Peter Robinson. Peter Robinson just got an email that tells him that mold drain has been assigned to him and that he needs to deal with that. You could also send him an email yourself. You'll want to contact Peter and make sure that he's got whatever material he needs to update the standard, list of variances that may have been put out, the existing documentation file, that kind of thing. In the future, the documentation file will be in here, so there would actually be another file in here in the 2003 version that was the documentation file for this standard. So Peter won't need to get that from you. He'll be able to go to this collection for the previous version, and he'll be able to get that older documentation file and see for himself. And then for 2018, you as discipline lead and whoever is the team lead will jointly create a new documentation file for this updated version. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to share with you today. As always, if you have questions, check the SharePoint site for more information. We're going to have more of these videos there, and you'll also be able to contact the training team or contact me and get a hold of me, and if I can help you, I will.